Everybody. It's 8:30, starting off your morning right with a cybersecurity webinar. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Cassie Hopkins, and I help run the webinars here at Hausman Group. We are very excited today to offer not one, not two, but 4 industry-related cybersecurity webinars partnering with Arctic Wolf. I just want to go over a couple things that are going to happen during this webinar. So this is going to be recorded. And that means that if you registered for this, whether you could come for a little bit of it, the whole live version, or couldn't make it at all, you're still going to get a copy of the webinar slides, as well as a link to the recording of the presentation itself. You can also ask questions at any point in time during the webinar. You can use that chat feature down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can ask a question to David, our presenter, at any point in time, but we are going to save all of those questions that you type into the chat for the very end. David is a trove of knowledge on this stuff, guys, so if you have any questions, whether you think it's stupid to ask or really overly complex, I would really encourage you to just type it in and see what David says. Without further ado, let me introduce David Cruz. David is the Director of Insurance Alliances here at Arctic Wolf, the leader in security operations and incident response. At Arctic Wolf, David works with cyber insurance carriers and brokers like Hausman Group to deliver services and tools that help businesses of all sizes and industries reduce the frequency and severity of cyber attacks, and should one occur, respond to them with full service incident response programs. Prior to his current role, David was the cyber practice leader at Hausman Group, an insurance and risk management firm right here in Madison, Wisconsin, where he advised the firm's clients on how to align their cybersecurity practices with cyber insurance requirements to achieve the best risk transfer results. Thank you so much for being here, David, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. What we didn't mention there is that I was a nanny before I worked at Hausman Group. So I figured that wasn't maybe totally relevant to the professional bio, but the experience goes back a long ways, and to say that isn't relevant in some way to what we're talking about here today is maybe not quite the case. But great to see everybody on today's session, whether you're live or whether you're watching this on a recording later on. It's good to be back with the Hausman Group. Like Cassie said, I spent 6 years from about early 2014 to late 2019 working with the Hausman Group. The majority of that time was as one of the leaders of our technology and cyber insurance practice at the agency. So I see some names that are popping up on the registration, the attendee list, and I thought, oh, I actually wrote that policy way back in 2016. So it's fun to see some familiar names again. So it's good to be back having a discussion with you today. So what we're going to be talking about is very specific to manufacturers. Like Cassie had mentioned earlier, instead of taking sort of a big broad view of everything, we're going to take that broad view and we're going to narrow it to specific industries to talk about some of the intricacies of how cybersecurity is impacting, or maybe the lack of cybersecurity is a better way to put it, how that's impacting different industry verticals here. And we're going to start with manufacturing because I know that is one of the Hausman Group's biggest industry focus groups, and it's one of the most frequently attacked groups that we see on the incident response side here at Arctic Wolf. So we think it's a good idea to focus on that and then do a deep dive into some of the tooling that we're providing at no cost to Hausman Group clients to help reduce the frequency, severity, and insurability of cybersecurity catastrophes. So without further ado, we'll get into it. We're going to share some data, move into a platform demo. We got an hour booked on the calendar. Maybe we'll use 40 to 50 minutes or something like that. So we might get a little bit of time back in your day. But without any further ado, here we go. So this is really the question that I want to pose to everybody. What is the state of cybersecurity for manufacturers in 2023? And what is the state of cybersecurity incidents for manufacturers in 2023? Now, when I say incident here, that in our world, in the cybersecurity world, that's sort of it's a very specific term. So we're not talking about, hey, we saw something funny on one system and it wasn't a big deal. We're not talking about, oh, that's an odd little thing going off in that corner of the network, but it's no big deal. When we say incident, we mean a full-blown ransomware attack. We mean something like a business email compromise coupled with wire transfer fraud. We mean a large-scale data exfiltration of confidential information from your network outside your network and sent to, Lord knows where. So we're talking sort of full-scale catastrophes, so to speak, because that's really what we specialize in on the incident response side. Arctic Wolf Incident Response partners with about 33 different cyber insurance companies, many of whom that Hausman Group places policies with, to help their clients respond to these cyber catastrophes on a daily basis. over the past few years, we've seen a few thousand ransomware incidences, a few thousand business email compromise incidences. So we're drawing from a pretty deep well in order to share, frankly, what we're seeing for manufacturers in 2023. So we're going to start big picture here. Just broadly, manufacturers or not, attacks are frankly just hitting more and more companies. Over the past 10 years, the increase of cyber claims frequency has gone up a pretty whopping percent, 562% over the past 10 years. And that's not just because there are more cyber insurance policyholders. This is of the percentage of policies that exist, the percentage of claims that are hitting those policies has gone up pretty substantially. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that, not the least of which is 10, 12 years ago, the digital transformation of our companies was still in its infancy. You probably had email, you might have had a file server or, a file sharing program or something like that, but that might have been about it. Nowadays, almost every aspect of our companies has some sort of digital twin or digital equivalent, which means that there's just many more. In the business, we call it the attack surface. The attack surface has expanded. The available infrastructure for a threat actor to target and ultimately damage is just so much bigger than it was 10 years ago, because so much more of our corporate lives and our businesses' lives live online somewhere. So when we look over the past 10 years, the all-time high that we saw in terms of ransomware attack frequency was late 2021, specifically November of 2021. If we look back over the past few months, April of 2023, so a month and a half ago, that exceeded our all-time high. So ransomware is back in a big, big way. You might have heard some rumblings about, hey, 2022, there's a bit of a lull in ransomware, and there absolutely was. The Russian invasion of Ukraine played a direct role in the reduced frequency and severity of ransomware attacks in 2022. For a whole host of reasons that we can get into if you got a question about it, but it's kind of in the weeds stuff. But ultimately, that stasis has the pendulum has swung back in the other direction, and we're at a point where attacks are basically exceeding their all-time highs right now, that's no fun. That's no good for anybody. So let's focus specifically on manufacturing, and of the total incidences that we see, what percentage are manufacturers essentially? So what we're looking at right here is all of the incidences that we worked in 2022. And we can see manufacturing is right here. So just slightly above average in terms of attack frequency. What's important to note here is that even these, even healthcare and finance and insurance, these ones that are supposedly way far out ahead, they're only ahead by 2%. Like what this graph is really illustrating is that no one industry is necessarily immune. Even these shipping and logistics businesses down here, that could just be the result of a fluke in cases that we saw over the past year. But there's a pretty even spread amongst these businesses. So, traditionally, if you were to ask somebody on the street, hey, who's most likely to be the victim of a cyber attack? They might say healthcare system because they're going to steal healthcare data and PHI, personal health information. They might say the finance and insurance industry because they're going to take financial data, or they're going to try and scam people out of money. Those are your sort of traditional targets. But things like organizations like manufacturers and business services and construction firms, they are on not the attacker's hit list, because they don't really have a hit list, but they're just as much part of the victim profile as any business out there. So I just hope this dispels some of the rumors around, hey, just because I don't have personal information, I might not be a target. The data, frankly, just doesn't support that assertion. So it's just good to review that there. So we've talked about the increase in attack frequency. It's worth looking at the increase in attack severity as well. I know from my time in insurance, and certainly as risk managers, that risk is not just frequency. Risk is frequency plus severity. Both of those things obviously play a key role here. So when we look at how your average cyber claim cost has risen over the past, say, 4 years, that cost has gone up pretty substantially, from just around 87,000 in 2018 to around 200,000 in 2021. The primary reason for that increase over that time is the increase in ransom demands that threat actors are making of their victims. Back in 2017, 2018, your average ransomware demand was maybe around $5,000 to $10,000, if that. And just to take a step back for anybody that might not be familiar, my guess is we're probably all familiar with the term ransomware, but in case we're not, ransomware is a type of cyber attack where a threat actor will hack into your system. They will encrypt your files and force you to pay for a decryption key. So essentially, they lock up your files and you have to pay for the key to unlock them. That's essentially how that works. And the demands they would make for that unlocking key 4 or 5 years ago, like I said, were, in some cases as low as about $1,000. On the upper end, if it was a crazy high ransom, it might be $10,000. In 2022, the largest ransom that we paid for on behalf of a client was $3.8 million. So just the average demands that they've made over that time have just skyrocketed. So certainly gone are the days where your ransom payment might be $7,000. Now a six-figure ransom payment is by no means out of the question. That's frankly pedestrian for those of us in the incident response industry at this point here. So again, we'll focus on manufacturers in this particular section here. And again, manufacturers are sort of right in the middle of the pack in terms of incident cost. So when we get involved in an incident and we actually do all the incident response services that we deliver, this is how they break down. So there's really 4 key services that an incident response firm delivers to a client. The first thing they have to do is contain the threat. So when we get engaged in an incident, there's usually a hacker still in the system somewhere that we got to find and kick out of there. So there's going to be some cost to that. There's going to be some cost to investigate the scope and the breadth and the depth of the data security incident we're talking about. That's usually the biggest portion of our firm's cost during an investigation. If ultimately the organization doesn't have the ability to restore from backups and they really have no way out of this situation other than to actually pay a ransom, we will actually do the negotiation on behalf of the client using all the threat intelligence we've acquired over the course of around 600 negotiations. And then if the client needs help recovering their systems, we will deliver that as well. So you add that up for manufacturers, and we're close to about the 50,000 mark for just our services. That certainly isn't the total cost that a manufacturer is going to pay, though. If we look at that across all the costs they might incur, what's not included here is the actual ransom payment itself. So that, again, easily could be 6 figures plus. And manufacturers, in our experience, tend to pay those ransoms maybe at a little higher frequencies than some others, because for a manufacturer, it's often pretty simple to understand how much money you're losing on an hourly basis or how much money you're losing on a daily basis in a way that, if I'm a consulting firm, I can just push some of that consulting work to next week. If I'm a manufacturer, especially say I'm a food manufacturer, I can't always just push my milk production out a week or something like that. So it's very easy for a manufacturer to visualize their business interruption loss. So there's more of a temptation to pay the ransom more quickly without negotiating it to a lower amount, because they want to get the business up and running as quickly as they can, because you can just see the dollar signs racking up in a way that a business services firm just might not be as present to them in some cases. So the business interruption loss is not included in here. Your legal fees, your crisis communications, credit monitoring and notification for affected individuals, all of that, those are costs that you want to comprehend as you begin the discussion around what is the appropriate level of insurance for me, what kind of limits and premiums and retentions should I have, things like that. But it's just good to know where manufacturers fall in terms of our own costs here as well. So like I said, it's sort of middle of the pack in terms of the response cost, but there certainly are other costs not included here that are worth keeping in mind. So where does that leave us right now? We know that there's a higher claims frequency. We know that there's an increase in claims severity, and anybody that works for Houseman will tell you that this has resulted in a more demanding insurability process. So when I left the Houseman Group in 2019, it was sort of still the infancy of the cyber insurance market here. We had written probably 400 or 500 cyber insurance policies, but the market was really only, the carriers we worked with, they were only asking for maybe a 1-page application with 2 or 3 underwriting questions. And one of those questions was, have you had a claim in the past 5 years? So the applications were very, very easy to complete, frankly. Those days are frankly long gone. Now cyber insurance carriers are scanning your networks as part of underwriting. The applications themselves at a minimum are probably 4 or 5 pages. If you're a bigger entity, maybe 10 to 20 in some cases. So the underwriting rigors that that a business has to go through are frankly much, much higher. And even as the market softens, so to speak, over the past maybe 6 to 8 months, the premiums and the retentions might be a little bit more flexible, but the insurability demands likely aren't going anywhere because carriers have really wised up to what the minimum level of security ought to be in order to qualify for cyber insurance. So this ends up being a bit of a maelstrom of tough things that frankly any risk management team and any IT team has to deal with. So the good news is, though, is that these are solvable problems. They're problems to be sure, but they're not problems without a solution. So if we look at the frequency of attacks, the vast majority of the attacks that we see can be identified pretty easily here. So what you're looking at here is a breakdown of what we call the root points of compromise for our cyber investigations. Root point of compromise is kind of exactly what it sounds. It is the vulnerability or the single thing that the threat actor used to access your network. And if they didn't have access via this door, they wouldn't have been able to hack your network. That's essentially what we're looking at here. So what we're seeing is that the vast majority of attacks that we see, over 72% of attacks, are based on something called external exposure. And what that means for you is that things like how your employees remote into the network, if they're using a Windows remote desktop, if they're using a VPN to get in, if they're working from home, and heaven knows we're all doing more work from home the past few years. That particular type of attack vector is something that threat actors can leverage to gain access to your network, or a software exploit, meaning that there's an update that needs to be applied to some piece of corporate software. The update hasn't been applied, and a threat actor was able to access your network through that we call it an unpatched software vulnerability. They were able to get in and compromise your network before your team was able to patch and secure that vulnerability. So both of those things are things that you can actually scan for yourself and identify before a threat actor is able to compromise them. You're essentially taking the same tool that a threat actor would use to discover you, and you're using that to your advantage to discover the ways that a threat actor might compromise you, and then patch those vulnerabilities, close off those backdoors before they're able to do that. The other piece we'll look at is what we call user actions. So the external exposure part is mostly IT team issues. The user actions are things like somebody clicking on an infected link or an infected email attachment, and that somehow lets a threat actor into the network. That does happen, but it happens with much less frequency than you might imagine. If you're on LinkedIn or if you know anything about cybersecurity, you probably hear, oh, we got to train our people because if Dave clicks on a link, that could bring the whole house down. That happens sometimes. It's actually pretty rare. It's not that common of an occurrence, so it's worth planning for. But if I'm sitting there building out my IT and security practice, I'm focusing on this big blue category and less so on the orange category, because frankly, if I'm going to have a bad day someday, it's most likely going to be from an external exposure issue. So if we focus on manufacturers here, we break this down by industry right here. So what is the root point of compromise, the most common root point of compromise for manufacturers? So if we look right here, this is what we're looking at. So 72% of manufacturing incidences that we worked had the root point of compromise in an external exposure issue. So that actually lines up almost exactly with what the industry standard is, or across all industries. So again, there's nothing terribly unique about manufacturers in this way. If you're going to get hit with ransomware or some type of data security incident, 3 times out of 4, it's likely going to be because of some kind of software exploit, or because the way that your employees remote into their system is an insecure way of gaining access to the system. So kind of falls right into the median and what you'd expect right here. There are some industries where that's an outlier, say like finance and insurance, for example. They've got a huge problem with phishing emails. But you're not in finance and insurance, so we're not going to talk about that. So that's what we're looking at here. Is manufacturers are sort of right par for the course in terms of what should be the best ways to identify a potential incident and prepare for it and hopefully mitigate it. It's going to be focusing on external exposure. That's going to be your best bet. So me. I still got my little annotate button going on here. Okay, now we're in business here. The last piece we'll mention here is that, again, if we're talking about risk management as a reduction in frequency and severity, we've talked about frequency. We've talked about how identifying those vulnerabilities with some sort of scanning tool is going to reduce the frequency of an incident. having something like an incident response plan is going to reduce the severity of an incident. One of the best known sources of cyber incident cost data is the IBM Security Cost of the Data Breach Report. That's been coming out every year since I think 2011 or 2012. When I was working at Houseman with John Erickson and Matt Cleveland and some of those other folks in our cyber work group, we reviewed this report every single year that it came out. If you've ever heard a statistic like a cyber breach will cost you $300 per record, something along that lines, that statistic comes from this report. It's sort of the benchmark of cyber incident cost data. So what we see here is that if you actually have an incident response team and you actually have an incident response plan, and when I say incident response team, I don't mean cybersecurity professionals. What I mean is you've defined who needs to be in the room during an incident response. And that's going to be somebody on the technical side. It's going to be somebody on the legal side. It's going to be somebody on the finance side, somebody on the executive side. All of those roles are intimately involved in mounting an effective incident response. So if you formed that team and you've actually written some kind of incident response plan, you're going to have a dramatically lower cost of incident because you're frankly not going to be caught flat-footed if an incident happens. And that's something that we see time and time again. Organizations that have done some planning, they've maybe tested that incident response plan in some way, have dramatically more effective incident response efforts because they have thought about how things can go wrong during an incident and they've planned for that ahead of time. They've almost done a pre-mortem exercise, not a post-mortem exercise, and they understand where the fail points are and how to avoid them in a live fire situation here. So going through that time to identify who needs to be in the room where it happens and what that plan actually looks like will have a measurable impact on reducing claims frequency and severity. And we certainly know that improves insurability. The best way to make sure you've got good insurance terms next year is to not have a claim this year. And if you do have a claim, to make it a little one. So really, what do we do then if we want to address the frequency of cyber claims and we want to reduce the potential severity of cyber insurance claims and also ultimately equip you for a demanding insurability process? We need something that's going to hit those three goals here. And that's really what the core of the partnership we have with Houseman Group is designed to do, is to help address frequency, help address severity, and improve insurability. And the way that we do that is through a platform called Cyber Jumpstart. And that's what is available to you today. That's what's available to you as a Houseman Group client here. So if we look at what this platform actually is, it's comprised of three core service modules, three core solutions, we'll say. The first is the ability, it's a module that helps you build an incident response plan. This is something that's going to directly help reduce incident severity and reduce business interruption loss. We've really laser focused this incident response plan on the technical aspects of IR, the technical aspects of the incident response plan that often aren't comprehended prior to an incident. So if you collect that information and you've got that on hand, that can reduce your incident cost by about 50%. And it really enables you to do other things like, do a tabletop exercise. That's a tabletop exercise is where you actually get everybody in the room and you actually run through some scenarios to see how your plan stacks up against certain types of instances. So if you can't do that if you don't have an IR plan. So that's one thing that we're going to enable you to do. The second piece that we're looking at is security project guides. Those are things to help you understand how you can improve insurability, reduce frequency and severity of claims by helping you essentially kickstart different projects within your organization. So we talked earlier about how the scope of insurability demands has frankly skyrocketed over the past, say, 3 to 4 years. IT teams often know what they need to do, but they don't quite know where to actually begin working on some of those projects, because ultimately cybersecurity and IT, they've got two different names for a reason. They're different business functions. Cybersecurity is an audit function of IT. That's sort of how you can think of how the two work together. So if you have an IT professional, they might know how to do some cybersecurity things, but they're not cybersecurity professionals. So what we've done here with the project guides is enabled an IT professional to kickstart a cybersecurity project and at least get it moving down the track and identify different groups or people that can help them with that project if they need the help. The last thing that we're going to show you is the Jumpstart Threat Scanner, and that's very laser focused on reducing claims frequency. We've talked about how those external exposure issues are 3 out of 4 times are the root cause of the attacks that we see. So we want to identify those things because we know that the most frequent causes of a claim. And we also know that those are, frankly, we know if insurance companies are scanning your network during the underwriting process, those are going to be immediate disqualifiers for cyber insurance, because carriers know that these are the things that frequently lead to claims. So if we can help identify these immediate disqualifiers and help reduce claims frequency, hopefully we've done something good there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to actually start sharing the actual platform so that you can see what that looks like here. So give me just one moment to switch that up, and we'll get on our way. Okay. All right, now we're in business. So Cassie is going to drop a link into the chat right here. And that link is going to take you to this page. So as a Houseman client, you've got your own personal, your own landing page for this program here. If you haven't registered for a Cyber Jumpstart, if you haven't registered for Cyber Jumpstart Access yet, I'd encourage you to do that while we're on this session right now. So you just enter your name, your email, your company, your job title, and then you have to enter what country you're in. I'm assuming everybody's in the US, but we got to collect that anyway. So by doing that, you're going to essentially get access to your account. You're going to enable what's called multi-factor authentication. We're a security company. We wouldn't sleep well at night if we didn't make that a necessary part of this. So once you've enabled multi-factor authentication and you've registered for account, then you're going to actually be in the Jumpstart portal, which looks just like this. So as a risk professional here, I'm going to show you how you can add your IT team, whether they're in-house or third party. I'll show them how you can get them access to this account right here. But first, we're just going to review again the core solutions within Cyber Jumpstart here. So the first piece we looked at again is that incident response plan building tool. So we're going to open that up. The first thing that we're going to see is that we're going to ask you to document your internal executive response leaders. And again, this is more than just the technical leads. So your executive lead, your technical, your financial, your legal. If you say you want to add somebody else on this list, like an operations person, you can add as many, frankly, as you want here, as many as you feel need to be in the room when something's happening. So you document all those leaders here. You document their contact information so that you have that at the ready should you actually need it. Once you've moved from your internal team, we're going to move you to the external providers. So your incident response provider, Arctic Wolf, that's us. Your primary IT provider, if you work with a third-party managed service provider, you're going to want to have their contact information. And you're going to want to have them documented, because if something happens, they're going to need to be in the know, because they know your network just as well, if not better than you do. If you have a data privacy law firm already, you're going to want to document their information here. I wouldn't anticipate that most people on this call have worked with a data privacy attorney before. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. But if you have worked with one, you can document them here. What you don't want to do is document your internal general counsel, or maybe whoever your outside counsel is, because data security incidences, there's a whole world of data privacy law that comes into play during a cybersecurity incident. And the person that you might use for your retirement plan or your real estate transactions, it's just a whole different type of law. It would be like going to your butcher and asking for Brussels sprouts. They're different things. And then certainly you want to document your cyber insurance information as well, because that should be your first call in the event of an incident. Get in touch with your broker, get in touch with your carrier, so that you can file that claim and make sure that all of your costs get covered during the course of the incident, and make sure that you're connected with service providers that are already pre-approved by your insurance company. Next, we move into some pretty nitty-gritty IT data collection here. And this isn't something that we're not going to go into great detail on this, because this is just for your IT team to fill out. But this is all information that you absolutely need to have close at hand in the event that you actually are suffering some kind of a ransomware incident. So you need to document where your business locations are, where your physical locations are, where you have data centers and what data you have on them, what cloud services you frequently use, how your employees access the network remotely, and how non-employees might access, how does a vendor access your network remotely. Things like DNS and hostname information and virtual desktops. All of this is what's called your attack surface. These are the things that a threat actor is going to try and compromise in order to get into your business network in some way. So if you've got this information documented here, you don't have to start assembling this in the heat of an incident and getting that off to your incident response team, because you'll have done that already. From a tactical, that's sort of a strategic level. From a tactical perspective, incident escalation and communication is pretty critical during the course of an incident here. So what tools are you going to use to detect the incident? How are you going to communicate during an incident? we've seen, you know, this is less frequent now because organizations are just getting better at it. But when we started doing incident response 5-6 years ago, what would happen is the ransomware attack would happen, and then the IT person would get on a call or would shoot an email off to the executive team saying, hey, everybody, ransomware attack's happening, do this, that, and the other thing. The hacker's usually in the email. The hacker's usually in the email service, and they're just watching these emails go back and forth. And at one point, that we saw a threat actor actually respond to a company-wide email with themselves and saying, hey, by the way, I'm the one that hacked you. The ransom demand just went up $100,000. So you need to document what are going to be your communication methods outside of normal business channels. Are we going to move to personal emails? Are we going to move to personal cell phones? Are we going to have burner cell phones that are used for just this incident? You want to document that so you've got that plan ahead so that you don't fall into that situation where your communications are frankly being viewed by the threat actor. And the last thing that we'll have you do is document your critical business functions here. And this is, I think, honestly, the most important part of the entire planning process, because this is where we merge executive expectations with IT realities. So every incident we work, say it comes in on a Friday night, we'll get the CEO on the scoping call, we'll get the head of IT on the scoping call, we'll get the general counsel on the scoping call, and this is 10 p.m. on a Friday night. And the executive team saying, we got to be up and running Monday morning. It's unacceptable if we're not up and running by Monday morning. Well, sure, that's a reasonable expectation. That's fine if you as an executive team have resourced that capability. So if you as an executive haven't given your IT team the capability or enough resources to actually get that company up and running within 2 days, it's not going to happen. We saw one incident where the executive team had cheaped out on the amount of the internet bandwidth they were willing to purchase for the company. So they wanted to get up and running Monday morning, and they had to download all of their cloud backups to restore the company. It physically wasn't possible to move all of the data through that bandwidth in the course of 2 days. So it was literally impossible to restore the company because they hadn't resourced that capability. So by documenting these critical business functions and the IT dependencies and the supporting systems of those business functions, that allows the IT team to say, hey, yes, I understand that payroll processing is a critically important thing, but there are 5 or 6 systems that payroll depends on that we need to have up and running before we can turn the payroll machine back on. And that just enables a very effective conversation between an IT team and an executive team, and helps bridge that gap between, again, what those executive expectations are and what, frankly, the IT realities are. So once you've done that, congratulations, your IR plan has been updated, and you can actually download a PDF summary. We recommend printing this off, having a physical copy of it somewhere, having it somewhere that's off your computer, so that if you have a ransomware attack, the threat actor can't lock up your incident response plan. Happens very frequently. And certainly the plan is always available in Cyber Jumpstart as well. Cyber Jumpstart is just a website you can access from your Google Chrome or Firefox or Internet Explorer, which actually doesn't exist anymore. It's called Microsoft Edge now. Anyway, so you can access it from anywhere as well. So even if you don't have it printed off, you can still get it, but just don't have it on your desktop. That's all I'm saying there. So that's our tool to help reduce incident severity, is building the incident response plan. The tool to help reduce incident frequency is the Jumpstart Threat Scanner, and we'll do a little dive into what that looks like here. So as a business, you have a digital property schedule. If you're a manufacturer, you've got at least, sorry, can you hear my coffee machine beeping over there? As a manufacturer, you might have multiple locations. You've certainly got probably at least one location. And on your property insurance policy, you have to list what properties you have. That's called your property schedule. In the digital world, cyber insurers aren't requiring a digital property schedule, but that doesn't mean you don't have one. That digital property schedule is essentially your digital locations. So as a business, the first thing that you'd want to do is input what your digital locations are. So what websites you have and what IP addresses you have. This is something that, again, you're as a risk professional, you might not know this. This is 101 level stuff for an IT professional. They absolutely can they can tell you what IP addresses and locations they have. So once you've entered that information, what we're going to do is perform a scan of those assets, those digital locations, and let you know if we've detected any imminent threats within those digital locations here. Now at Arctic Wolf, we define an imminent threat as an external vulnerability that we have seen lead to frequent ransomware attacks or data security incidences. So we're not looking to identify every conceivable vulnerability that could exist in every piece of software you have. There actually is an organization that does maintain a list of every known software vulnerability. It's called MITRE, M-I-T-R-E. And that list of known software vulnerabilities is something like 85, 90,000 vulnerabilities long. We're not looking for all those. We're only looking for the ones that we know threat actors use to launch ransomware attacks. We're really laser focused on that. And that list of vulnerabilities is right here. This is what we're looking for when we're doing that scan. And if we find one of those imminent threats, we're going to tell you about it. We're going to tell you exactly what that threat is that we have. This RDP detection, what we're seeing here, this one vulnerability leads to 25% of all the ransomware attacks that we see. So we want to help you find that if you have it. So we're going to let you know exactly what we found. We're going to let you know exactly where we found it. So this location here, this would tell an IT professional down to the computer. It is that laptop, it is that server, it is that desktop. It will tell them exactly what computer has that vulnerability so that they can go and take steps to actually remediate it. So once they've identified that vulnerability, there's a couple things that can happen. If the IT person doesn't know how to actually fix it, they can reach out to us. We can give them some guidance. If they actually want us to fix the vulnerability for them, we can certainly do that. That's a separate statement of work that we could generate for that, because that's a full-blown IT project. But we've got that capability, and if you opted for that, there's some preferred pricing for Houseman Group clients built in there. But really what they can do is once they've fixed that vulnerability, they can run the scan again, and it will just confirm that that vulnerability has been remediated, so to speak. So the actual Jumpstart threat scanner here, once you've run your first scan, you've got a 30-day window to use that scan at no cost. After 30 days, it's a $250 annual cost to maintain access to this threat scanner. In terms of scanning technologies, that's an incredibly affordable price. And Houseman Group has negotiated about a 75% discount off list price for their clients to use the service. So you would just proceed to payment, enter a credit card, and away you go. It's a pretty low touch, easy to use process there. But that enables you to just continue this imminent threat scanning on an annual basis. And remember that $250 is per year, not per month. So the last thing that we'll show you here is the Jumpstart guides. So again, these are very aimed at reducing incident frequency and severity, but also improving insurability. So what I've done here, but last April, I got to thinking about this, and I reviewed about 40 different cyber insurance applications because I wanted to see what carriers are actually looking for during the underwriting process. And we built these Jumpstart guides to match to what we know carriers frequently ask for in cyber insurance policies. So things like vulnerability scanning, EDR, endpoint detection and response tooling, security awareness training, email protections, things like that are things that we know carriers frequently ask for. So if we take something like identity and access management, that's just a $10 word for MFA, or multi-factor authentication, which probably everybody on this call is aware of by now, because you probably can't get cyber insurance without it. So say you didn't quite know where to begin with a project like this, you can click on the Identity and Access Management Project Guide. You can learn a little bit about what this control means. There's access to learning materials right here about how this control comes into play. And then you can either document proof of performance right within the platform so that when renewal time comes, you can reference this to say that, yes, we've got this control. Or if you don't know how to get this control, you can hit this Get in Touch button. And then again, our team will kind of walk you through, okay, what do you actually need to get this particular control in place to make sure that you can get insurance? If the control that you've got questions on is something that we offer at Arctic Wolf, we can help you get that in place. If it's not something we offer, we've got relationships with over 1,200 technology partners across the world, and plenty in the upper Midwest right here. So if what you need is something that we don't offer ourselves, we'll connect you with a local provider, probably close to 4 or 5 local providers, so you can have some choice that can help you actually get that control in place right here. So the goal here is to essentially act as a connection point between the controls that you need and the service providers that can actually deliver them for you. So the last thing that we'll show you right here is this users function right here. So again, if you've clicked on the link in the chat and you've actually made your Cyber Jumpstart account, the first thing that I'd recommend doing is making sure that you add your IT team to this account. So you're going to do that by hitting Add User. You're going to type in their first name, their last name, their email address, and then what level of permission you'd want them to use. As an IT pro, I'd say make them super administrators. That just lets them view and edit things in your account, and it lets them add or remove users as well. So that's what I would recommend giving them there. And at that point, you just hit save. Once you've hit save, an email will be sent to them, and it'll say you've been added as a user in Cyber Jumpstart. Create your username and password, and then they will have access to the platform in the same way that you do. And then really what that enables you to do is all be singing off at the same songbook. The last thing we want is to have, the IT person create one account and the risk manager create another account. And all of a sudden there's like 2 or 3 accounts for one business and nobody's quite doing the same thing. We want everybody using the single account right here. So last thing I'll show you within the platform here is just this contact button here. There's really 2 reasons you might want to get in touch with us outside of, say, the security project guides. If you're actually experiencing an incident, if you are actually experiencing some kind of a ransomware attack, get in touch with us. This program is available to all Hausmann Group policyholders, not just cyber insurance policyholders. So if you don't have cyber insurance and you need to get in touch with us because you're having some kind of a bad incident, contact us, let us know. We'll still recommend that you file a claim with the Hausmann Group claims advocates, but we can get started to work on that right away. The other is if you've just got general inquiries or you need support on the platform, you can document that right here, submit it, and both of these fields go to me. So you'll get me on the other side of this if you have an issue, or it might be my colleague John as well. He's the product manager for Cyber Jumpstart. So it's either me or John. Both of us are nice guys. So if you need some assistance, you can reach out to us either way right here. So that is Cyber Jumpstart right here. So we are just going to hop back into this other into the PowerPoint right here. I think we're just actually nearing the end, but we got one more thing to show you. So give me just one moment and we'll do that. Oh, here we go. I thought I lost my Zoom there, Cassie. I was really worried for a second. Okay. All right. Now we're back in business. Okay. So again, the process to get things started, you're going to designate a representative. That can be you right on this call. That person is going to register your organization. They're going to enable multi-factor authentication and then invite your teammates to the platform again. So everybody's singing off the same songbook here. And at that point, you just begin working. You begin your security journey, get the scanning running, get your incident response plan at least built, and then start completing some of those projects. And then at that point, you've started to make some meaningful dents in reducing the frequency and severity of incidences within your organization. So by all means, you can contact your agent at Hausmann Group. They've all been briefed on this. Your account managers at Hausmann have been briefed on this. Cassie, who's on the call, she has been too. So there's lots of folks at Hausmann that know what's going on with this particular program here. So you can reach out to them, or you can reach out to me personally as well. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So with that, one last thing that I'll mention here is once you've gotten yourself registered and you've begun making your plan and you've talked to your agent, if you've got specific questions here, this Calendly link right here, and Cassie can maybe include that in the follow-up email here, you can actually book time on my calendar with this link right here. You can just copy and paste that into your web browser. This has live viewing into my calendar. So if you just want to book 30 minutes on my calendar for you and I to review this one-on-one, happy to do that. There's no reason you can't do that. And I want to make sure you've got that kind of access here. So with that, like I said, I thought we might hit 40 to 50 minutes. We're right at 43 minutes here. So we've got some times for questions if you've got them. If not, we'll give you 17 minutes back in your day. But that's what I've got for you today here. So Cassie, anything come through the Q&A line while we were chatting? Or did I just do such a good job that there's no questions at all?
You are thorough as ever. Now is the time for anyone to chat with David if you would like to. I see we've still got quite a few people on the call. If you would like to send something in, you just use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll give you guys a couple minutes. All right. Nothing's sounding off. So it looks like we're going to get some free time back in our day, back in our morning. Thank you guys so much for joining. It would mean a lot to us if you would fill out the survey at the end once we end this webinar. We'd love to hear what you thought. If you have any ideas for future webinars, or if you just thought of something, you go, oh shoot, I wish I could have asked David, you can put that in the survey as well. Insurance wise, we do have an upcoming webinar on June 15th about the hard market. If that is something you're interested in learning about, that's coming down the pipe. As always, you can keep up with us on LinkedIn to see what events and webinars are coming up, but otherwise have a great rest of your morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.